Jay, I'm going to come to you. Richie mentioned about the Brighton kid. He's essentially burst onto the scene at Brighton, but has been heavily linked with big moves in the past. You look at United, Chelsea, before he'd even moved to Brighton. He's now linked with a £50 million move to Liverpool. Is that a realistic signing? What do you know about him?
I don't think so. I think if you think Núñez is a risk from Sporting, he's far more experienced than Caicedo. I think he's played 10, 11 games for Brighton. Many players can look great over 10 games. I wouldn't be putting 50 million down unless you've been scouting him long before he got on the scene at Brighton, because 10 games doesn't warrant 50 million, mate, unless he scores a hat-trick a game. I wouldn't be entertaining that whatsoever. So I think if you're not willing to take the risk on someone like Núñez, I know the big clubs are interested in him as well. I don't see why you'd pay that type of money for Caicedo either, to be honest.
Yeah, it's certainly a hefty price tag for someone who's played not a lot of games for Brighton. He impressed at Independiente and is moved to Europe and certainly turned down a lot of big clubs. Kev, I'll come to you. He's turned down Chelsea, United, Barcelona before he moved to Brighton. Do you think he's done enough already? Jay doesn't seem to think so. Do you think he's done enough already to warrant a move this early on? And do you think Brighton can cope with losing someone who potentially could be very influential for them this season, having already lost Yves Bissouma in that midfield?
You can look at the United game and think, well, yeah, he looks amazing, and think that he deserves his move already for what he done in that one game. But as Jay quite rightly says, to play only 10 games, you can look amazing. I look amazing on YouTube, you know what I mean, playing in goal. You know, you can get good snippets of me. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm a fantastic goalkeeper. Do you know what I mean? But you have these sort of things. We're at that later part of the transfer window that I think it would be a great deal for Brighton rather than for Liverpool to get 50 million in for a player who's played less than a third of the games and gives them an opportunity to go in and buy someone relatively for the same amount. It's perfect for Brighton. It's perfect for people it's better for the selling club than it is for the people who want to buy the player themselves. I think it's a bit hit and miss. It'll be too much of a gamble for me than what Núñez was.
Yes, yeah. It certainly seemed like a lot of hype around a player who hasn't really played a whole bunch of games in the Premier League. He headed on loan to a club in Belgium whose name I haven't got a clue.
Beershot. What an alcoholic dream. Beershot.
Yeah, I thought that when you said
it. He headed on loan to a club in Belgium last season. Did really, really well. But Jack, he's an incredibly well-rounded player that we know from his game against United that he's certainly got a lot of talent and hopefully for Brighton a big ceiling. He can play in the 6. He can play as an 8. He can push forward. Would a player as versatile as he's shown in the past, briefly at Independiente, would a player as versatile as that, someone who can play as a 6, can play as an 8, can get forward, can press high, would that suit the Liverpool squad? Surely it would do.
I don't think it could hurt in the slightest. You know, I mean, I will admit, you know, I wasn't watching that United match with sitting in front the monitor, you know, full screen, just locked in. I had it kind of in the peripheral. So he had a performance that I didn't catch my eye. I only knew of his name because he was linked to United. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a guy that I've wanted for ages, and I think he's got top class talent. I'm going to watch the match against West Ham tomorrow, and if he plays in it, I'm going to keep an eye on him specifically because I want to get a chance to, now that he's really in my eye. But at the same time, He's 20. He ticks the Jurgen Klopp box of a difficult upbringing, and he's going to come in and have that dog in him. He'll join Nunez and Diaz and some recent signings like that. And he would shake things up. He would push some people, and I think he would alleviate the minutes pressure on a lot of players. I don't think it'd be a terrible signing. At 50 million euros, though, I think you have to question why in 10 matches he has improved his price 45 million. And Nice makes a very good point. That was a bigger priority for me there. But for his price tag to go from 5 million to 45 to 50 million to tenfold increase in 10 matches, it's quite impressive. It's like he plays 11 matches, he's going to be 55 million. He's basically every match just adds 5 million euros in terms of value to him. So maybe getting him now before the West Ham match would save us 5 million euros. That'll be an interesting signing there. He wouldn't be my first choice. I'm readily proven wrong all the time. When Jota was first signed, when Tsimikas was first signed, they were guys that I wasn't dismissive of, but I had skepticism, and they proved me wrong. I think that Caicedo would go right into that mold of guys who I think could really do a good job, and the versatility helps, because if he could cover for Fabinho, that's a position I want us to have a guy in very often. And if he can do that and play as an 8 as a different option, then he has, not twice as good a chance of playing, but he offers us an option in a spot that I think we're kind of light in. So it wouldn't be a terrible signing. And I think for a 20-year-old, I typically see us go in like the 23, 24, 25-year-old range, because those guys, as they're bedded into the squad in the next 2-3 years, then they'll be getting into their prime. So when they're coming into major first-team roles, that's when they're getting into really their peak years. But if you signed him now, not thrusting a big first-team role on him yet, developing him over a few years, it would be okay. I think it would be good. I'd be skeptical, but I'm not really in a position to say that Klopp and company are incapable of developing players, because they've proven that they have a very good track record of that.
Can I just interject? Sorry, with Caicedo, like you mentioned, he can play in that 6 role, and he absolutely can. Like, he's on the 84th percentile when it comes to tackles, 86th percentile when it comes to clearances, but he also dribbles quite a lot, 73rd percentile, and he shoots quite a lot as well, the 64th percentile for midfielder, 69th percentile for assists. And yes, he has just burst onto the scene. I think he's played 15 full games for Brighton, but he's 20 years old, and the reason why the price tag is so high now is because it's the 20th of August. Brighton are going to absolutely milk it. They know that Liverpool are perhaps desperate. It seems like we're even talking as fans saying that we need midfielders. So obviously Brighton hierarchy is saying, well, you know what? We could probably put another 50 million on, and they'll still buy someone like this, because they need someone like this right now. With our injury, record in midfield, it's not great. He's 20 years old. And I think if we're talking, I didn't see what the rumours were, but if we're saying 45 million, I don't know. I feel like that's perhaps like recoupable for a 20-year-old, especially considering he won't be necessarily playing first team football every single time. So perhaps with Klopp's guidance and with the coaching that he can provide, and all of his coaches can provide, he's only ever going to get better at 20 years old. It's not as if we're buying a 30-year-old like Casemiro, who perhaps is a good signing. I don't know. The jury's out. I personally don't think it is. But Casemiro is not going to get better. He's already at his prime. Man United aren't going to recoup that. Whereas Liverpool might very well recoup anywhere between 35 and 45 million. So, it's a high value because it's the 20th of August. I think if Liverpool went at the start of the season, obviously without his good couple of games, they probably would have got him at half of the price. But he's certainly someone who I think Liverpool would be looking at or should be looking at. But, that's the reason why the value is so high. But with that, I'm sure he won't come in on a massive wage, and that will perhaps tempt FSG and co even more so, because it will keep that wage structure down.
Yeah, the wage is a very key one. It's something with our wage structure we look at when we're signing players.